Hello, hello, hello. All right. Here we are. What's today's date? The 26th. January 26th. So I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but there's been a recent ruling from the Supreme Court that ordered the Texas National Guard, or Texas, not National Guard, yeah, Texas National Guard in Texas, to essentially kind of cease and desist their obstruction of the U.S. Border Patrol at a particular park. I forget the name of the park. There's a park down by the border where you've got National Guard and folks. I guess there's some crossing, some easy crossing juncture between the United States, Texas, and Mexico that a lot of migrants use to cross without authorization. So, Texas has been occupying this park and not allowing the U.S. Border Patrol to essentially do its job or, essentially run the border. So, which is its constitutional obligation and right. So, the issue that's happening right now is Texas is saying that they are essentially being non-compliant with the Supreme Court's order to essentially get out of the way and allow the border guard to cut the razor wire that Texas laid out along the border, etc. And currently, Texas Governor Greg Abbott and a few other high prominent Texas politicians are in favor of this continued defiance of the Supreme Court order. Now, oh my God, right? I mean, this is the first time in a long time that a state has essentially outright defied a Supreme Court order. And when I first heard this, obviously, it kind of jarred me a little bit. It kind of shocked me. And I'm like, wow, that's, I'm like, that's kind of shocking. So, but after thinking about it a little bit more, I realized, there's actually not a lot to be worried about. In this sense, there are a few dynamics that are happening here that, in time, play themselves out not so disfavorably to the federal government, and in more specifically the Biden administration, and more particularly Biden's re-election campaign. Because up to this point, what has been the essentially the battle cry for Republicans and people on the far right, especially as it relates to this issue, is this border issue. Okay, the border, secure the border, right? We've been hearing that, secure the border, secure the border. Okay, so there are a couple of things about that. One is essentially the border situation has been, status quo for the past, 40, 50 years, okay? In Texas, up until the election campaign of Donald Trump, and just, maybe slightly before that, actually it was like Lou Dobbs, maybe 10 years ago or so, who started off on this issue. But you have to understand that in Texas itself, the border issue was not as pungent an issue as it is today, because in Texas, for the most part, migrants back and forth across the border has just simply been a way of life. Actually, it's people who live in Texas, their familial ties, etc. For those of you who don't know, Texas actually had a brief time as an independent republic from the United States, and that's what some of the people who are talking about, Civil War, they're hearkening back to that, etc. Well, the truth about that situation is, Texas was essentially kind of commandeered from Mexico back in that day by settlers that came from the States, settled in Mexico by invitation of Mexico, and essentially didn't leave. And then simply rose up against the Mexican government, making Texas its own republic. And then after a while, Texas was then absorbed and integrated into the United States. So when you understand that dynamic, you realize that Texas, Mexico, Texas, there's a lot of integration, cultural integration, familial integration, business integration. And so that's pretty much kind of how the place existed up until the past maybe 20 years, when you essentially had individuals that were a part of think tanks, etc., who started to actually stoke and use this issue as a political wedge, and very successfully over the past 20 years. Now, that's not to say that there hasn't been, and especially after 9/11, a particular focus on the border that has to do with security, which I think that there's some real legitimate issues there. As it relates to security, they're not as extreme as people make them out to be. But any reasonable person can say, yeah, we should know and be able to have an accounting of people who come across the border, kind of one way or the other. And so the federal government has been essentially trying to work on that. But let me say this. Both right and left, leading pretty much up to this point, have kind of played this issue, right? You've had people on the left that have played the issue for demographic purposes. You've had people on the right that played the issue for business purposes. So you had pretty much this status quo of how people, how we actually just saw the issue in Texas. So it was never an issue of divisiveness at all, believe it or not, actually, because everybody kind of understood what they were getting out of it. Okay. And even to this day, the same thing. People are getting out of it what they want. And so that's why it's persisted. And so, for example, in spite of Texas and all of the dust it's kicking up about secure the border, it was just really yesterday that the delegation in the House of Representatives, the Republicans in the House of Representatives, have actually stalled an immigration bill that would actually help fix the border. Okay, so again, this is where the politics, and that's why I don't get emotional about the issue, because I understand how people are being played, okay, on both sides as it relates to it. So I don't, you're not gonna jerk me into your game, okay? Because on the right, if you didn't want immigration, you'd fine every business $5,000 per head. You can pass that law today. You do anything else you want, right? So you do it today, and it'd be stopped in its tracks, okay? On the left, same thing. You could pass laws and do what you want. You can add more aid to the border, etc. And so in this particular instance, because we have some things that we're trying to, the Congress is trying to accomplish, federal government at aid to Ukraine, aid to Israel, etc., that there is this impetus to make the border issue move. And you had good faith people on the right and left currently, actually, who are working on that issue. But then at the very last minute, the lack of faith stepped back in to play this issue for the political football that it is. And so now you have Republicans that have actually pulled the bill that was on the precipice of passing. I mean, you've got Republicans right now who are like, what? And so that's what's going on. So everybody's kind of been played for fools right now. And so as I looked at this issue, I saw, wow, we've got a state that's defying the Supreme Court. What does that mean? I mean, are troops going to be sent down? You got the Texas National Guard at this park. On propaganda platforms like TikTok, etc. I mean, you get on there and it's crazy the way that algorithm it gins up kind of intra-American discord, right? And just kind of in general, there's this sense where you have a kind of subset of people who are looking for confrontation and looking to stoke confrontation for different reasons, whether it's political, personal, whatever. So if you talk about the people who are looking to be a part of something, right? To be a part of this divisive cause, whether political or personal. So they're having their moment right now. And I thought to myself, wow, what does it mean? And when I really thought about it, I realized, wait a minute, it doesn't mean anything. What will the federal government do? And I thought about it. What will the Biden administration do? We are months away from from an election that's happening in November. It's January going into February right now. Well, what's going to happen is nothing. Nothing is going to happen. You know why nothing is going to happen? Because the play that Texas just made in defiance of the Supreme Court, in defiance of the federal government's obligation and right to essentially police and man the border, they have created the national boogeyman that essentially plays right into the Biden's campaign of democracy, preserving democracy, and it essentially heightens, or let's just say creates a more stark relief on the extremism of people on the right who want to essentially have a civil war. And between, and let's be very clear about that. So most people, 95% of the people in the country don't want a civil war. You got a small fraction, minority of people who are willing to go active. It's those people who are being animated right now. And what's happening is that animation is going to is essentially presenting itself in a very imposing way through different media channels, and it's making Texas and its politics vis-a-vis the Republican Party look very, very extreme. Could you imagine if you are a swing